And who are you?
We're friends of Dorothy.
Right.
Since the premiere of The Muppet Show in 1976, the Muppets have been not only adored by fans who grew up with the original show in the 70s and 80s, but also by younger generations who experienced subsequent installments of the ever-expanding Muppets franchise. Perhaps the loudest demographic of fans is the queer community. But why is that so? What is so appealing about fuzzy puppets that can sing and dance? Are gay people just weirdos who will obsess over anything with rainbow imagery and musical numbers? Well, to a certain degree, yes. Of course, it's quite a bit deeper than that, but on a surface level, it's super gay. 7 seasons into Sesame Street, Jim Henson and his crew felt like making something less educational and more grown up. Something that could give them more freedom to express themselves and have mature humor, things that Sesame Street could not allow. This ended up being The Muppet Show.
It's The Muppet Show with tonight's guest star, Mr. Joel Grey.
The Muppet Show was a show about a variety show. In this variety show, every week the Muppets would invite a different human celebrity guest and perform numerous acts including stand-up comedy, sketches, and musical numbers. It took inspiration from British music hall and American vaudeville traditions. These were rooted in brassy, vulgar performances and were cleverly censored by sarcasm, irony, and parody, and even secret slang words, resulting in a theatrical, self-aware, risque, tongue-in-cheek style. Because British music hall and vaudeville pushed boundaries and valued subtext, they were very appealing to queer people who saw it as a safe space for self-expression at a time where nobody was openly gay. These styles are intimately immersed in queer culture, which has an inherently socially layered notion of performance pertaining to personal identity and expression. Both queerness and these old performance styles play with the idea of being hidden in plain sight. Striving for expressive freedom in a family format, it makes sense that The Muppet Show would follow in this tradition.
Look at you like, that's magical, but the guy's nuts.
No, but do you think that perhaps it's everyone's, one reason why the show is so
I think
popular? Everyone's private passion is to act crazy.
Yeah.
Richard Hunt was a major voice behind The Muppet Show, in addition to creating and puppeting the characters Scooter, Beaker, Janice, and Statler. He was also openly gay in the 1970s, a time where on-screen queer representation was few and far between, and positive depictions were even fewer. Hunt has said that in his work on the Muppets, he intentionally sought to insert queer subtexts, often basing performances off of personal experiences. At the same time, though the puppets as a medium allowed their performers to express themselves, it did not limit them to their physical selves. Jordan Schildkraut states in The Performance of Nonconformity on The Muppet Show, or How Kermit Made Me Queer, the ethnic and racial identities of the human puppeteers effectively fade from the stage, giving the Muppets the freedom of performing across racial and ethnic boundaries without the condescension or grotesque caricature that traditionally accompanied such performances. This becomes especially interesting when we consider gender, as 2 of the female characters, Janice and Miss Piggy, are voiced by men. A Muppet's gender can be distinguished by their eyelashes and what they wear. In other words, because a puppet is an object that does not possess an inherent gender, it is assigned one. Characters are coded to have a certain identity. Too often, people who are upset by the notion of gender presentation versus identity argue Muppets don't have genders because they're puppets and don't have genitals. These are the same people that get mad when Gonzo wears a dress because he's a boy and boys can't wear dresses. Anyways, we'll come back to that later. By purposely gendering themselves and then having a show which playfully approaches performance, the Muppets often subvert from the expectations they themselves created. On this subject, Schildkraut says that by failing or refusing to conform to their quote-unquote proper roles, the characters on The Muppet Show queer, as a verb, categorical identities based on race, gender, and sexuality, exposing them as performances. Miss Piggy is by far the Muppet who offers the most aggressive gender performance. The intention for Miss Piggy was that she would resemble old Hollywood divas such as Mae West and Judy Garland, and was even named after Peggy Lee. In one of the pilots shot for The Muppet Show, Miss Piggy was a generic female pig puppet. Though she still had her signature blonde wig, she had small beady black eyes and hooves instead of hands. When the show was greenlit, her puppet was changed to have big blue eyes and hands with satin gloves. With each season came alterations, reshaping of her head, resizing of her eyes, and increasingly elegant wardrobe. With each alteration, Miss Piggy became more and more of a feminized caricature. Going back to British music hall and vaudeville, Miss Piggy is probably the Muppet who embraces these traditions the most. Being directly modeled on female icons, which were a big part of those traditions which accepted drag and cross-dressing as an art. Discourse over the last 20 years has claimed that Miss Piggy herself is somewhat of a drag queen. She is a woman voiced by a man, comes from the same performance traditions, has big eyes and a fabulous wig, and plays up her femininity with a diva persona that exists separately from her life as a quote-unquote normal pig. And if that wasn't enough, Miss Piggy is also featured on an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars during the infamous Reading Challenge, where she provides her sassy comments and played-up persona, further solidifying her status as a drag queen. In a much broader sense, the Muppets are a group of outcasts, allowing queer fans to identify with their shared otherness and read the Muppets as an allegory for queerness. Though not always acknowledged explicitly, it's been made quite clear that there is a distinct opposition between humans and Muppets. In the films especially, the human characters tend to look down on the Muppets as an inferior social group. They are treated the way many visible minorities are treated in real life. Kermit's phrase, "It ain't easy being green," is hugely symbolic in this sense. Even within this eclectic band of misfits, though, there's one that sticks out.
In a major feat of death-defying intellectualism never seen before, the great Gonzo will recite Shakespeare while suspended by his nose from a feather boa 9 feet in the air. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Gonzo!
There's Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, and then there's the great Gonzo. Nobody knows what species Gonzo is. The ambiguity of his species and the weirdness of his performances mark Gonzo as the freak of the already freaky Muppet family. As a running gag, he's consistently placed within an unlabeled or non-specific category, and this translates to his gender identity as well, something that is revealed in an official comic strip from 1982, where Gonzo walks past the men's and women's bathroom to walk into a door labeled whatever. In the Muppets Wizard of Oz movie, Gonzo is credited as the Tin Thing instead of the Tin Man. There is, in fact, an entire film dedicated to Gonzo figuring out what he is. Muppets from Space is a 1999 film that starts with Gonzo feeling sad about not knowing what he is and that nobody else is like him. To make a long story short, Gonzo finds out he's an alien and is able to make contact with his species, but ultimately decides to stay on Earth with his family, the Muppets. He literally chooses his found family versus his blood relatives, which is a theme rampant in queer texts and in real life. In 2022, Disney Jr. aired an episode of the rebooted Muppet Babies series called Gonzorella, which features baby Gonzo in a princess dress. Conservative commentators were outraged by this episode and spoke out against Disney for changing a beloved character and indoctrinating their kids with transgender propaganda towards a woke agenda. But what change are they talking about? Anyone well-versed in the Muppets franchise would realize that Gonzo wearing a dress is true to his character. This episode is inspired by the original Muppet Babies cartoon from the 80s, in which Gonzo wears a dress. But even that is not the first instance of Gonzo's quote-unquote cross-dressing female impersonation act, or drag act, which was mentioned in the first season of The Muppet Show back in 1976. In recent years, the Jim Henson Company, now owned by Disney, has definitely taken notice of its queer fans and has leaned into the idea that the Muppets are campy, with frequent collaborations with queer icons such as Lady Gaga and RuPaul. With Ru and Elton John as special guests, in 2013, Lady Gaga and the Muppets Holiday Spectacular comes as the pinnacle of the embrace of camp. But the fact remains that this is not new. Since the beginning, there have been countless examples of homoerotic relationships within the Muppets world, from Ernie and Bert.
Do you like me? If you do, please say that you like me.
To Mr. Honeydew and Beaker.
Why, Beaker, you're hauntingly attractive today.
And the less obvious Waldorf and Statler.
What's your wife's name, Waldorf?
Astoria!
It figures.
From the many gay celebrity guests that were on the original Muppet Show to the actual gay people who worked on the show behind the scenes, it should come as no surprise that queer people love the Muppets. After all, it is thanks to the lovers, the dreamers, and you, the gay people. I know you're gay. I see you. Oh yeah, you in the corner over there. Yeah.